Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order for the February 4th Canal Recreation Park District Board of Directors regular meeting. And Mr. Segedy, I was wondering if you would do us the honor of leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Way back there behind the screens. Oh, there he is. There he is. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I had to find a way to get you out from behind the technology there. So thank you for that. Now, we would have a roll call, please. Yes.
Yes.
Here.
And with her departure, I want to thank Aileen for calling the roll and reminding all of you to keep your microphones on so that she can hear you since she is attending remotely. And she has our nice little reminders here in front of us. And with that, that'll take us to special presentations. I understand the general manager will be kicking us off with that. So Mr. Friedel.
Thank you, Chair Nichols and members of the board. Tonight, we have an in-house special presentation from our own Mr. Hare regarding art, history, and education. And he's always upset if I stumble too much into what he's going to talk about. But very, very briefly, we came across this subject by way of a committee, the ad hoc committee, and recently in November had a discussion, and it kind of expanded from art specifically to art, history, and education, and that got our creative juices and interest flowing as staff about, well, what are the different art, history, and education things that we work on? And Tom, that's really what Tom's going to talk about, but before he starts, I want to kind of remind everyone that CRPD mission is to, to enrich the quality of our life and our community by preserving and enhancing recreational opportunities, parks, and open space. And what we know is that we definitely do things that are in our mission and even beyond our mission. And we had a lot of fun kind of delving into some of the areas like art, history, and education, and how in addition to the park, open space, and rec stuff, we kind of weave in art and history and education. And because Tom was not going to give you the definition, I thought I would, of each of those things, right? You weren't going to do the definitions. So, oh, right. So art, this is according to Webster. I used an old actual real dictionary. Art is the conscious use of skill and creative imagination, especially in the production of aesthetic objects. Now, of course, there's 7 definitions of all these, but I'm going to give you kind of the one that seemed to stick out the most for me. History is a branch of knowledge that records and explains past events. Okay. And education is, I'm using 2 definitions, to develop mentally or morally, especially by instruction. And education, the knowledge and development resulting from an educational process. So we had this really fun conversation in November, and staff left thinking, well, let's just, per the committee is Sue and Nellie, and they said, well, why don't we just even try to grasp what we do? And so we had a lot of fun putting this together. Mr. Hare.
All right, thanks, Jim. Yeah, Mark, if you could pull it up. PowerPoint. All right, so like I said, Jim did steal like my whole intro. Yeah. But just kind of repeating a little bit of what he said. Yeah, it actually came out, we had a board retreat back in January 2020. We were discussing like the possibility of art in the Canal Rec and Park District and how we should take this. And then in February, the following month of 2020, the board decided that, hey, it's more than just like a sculpture or a piece of artwork. There's like so many different issues to talk about. It's not something we could just like do. So that's why we formed the ad hoc committee. And then the, the ad hoc committee, when we got together, like Jim said, it was a lot of fun. We had rec staff there, and, my staff was there, and Sue and Nellie were there. And it was kind of neat. You got energized because sometimes it's so inherent in our process and our thoughts. It happens organically. So it's kind of interesting what we came up with, and we kept on writing things. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. How are we going to do this? What are we going to do? And then we even expanded it upon that, because we started with art, education, history for like we're the almost tangible things. And then, the rec staff said, well, we have programs that support art, education, and history. I think that should be included too. And they said, well, we also have partners that deal with it too. So that's why it went from, just talking about sculptures and paintings to educate. So now it's art, education, history, and supporting programs and community partnerships in the Canal Rec and Park District. So what's the best way to talk about this? So what can it be? And I think when we look at ourselves, and just anybody, it's just like they would say, art is in the eye of the beholder, or even education and history is the eye of the beholder, and how you convey the message and what you try to get across. It could be formal. It's a painting. Everyone knows, oh, that's supposed to be art. It could be informal, meaning it's just something, just something that doesn't really, you don't even know you're doing it, it's happening. Or it's, functional, like when we try to do projects, we might do like a seat wall. It's really cool looking, but it's also can be used to sit on. And then sometimes it's really direct and in your face, like a musical or a cultural production, or sometimes it's really subtle. You don't even really notice it. So one of the things we thought was a really good example to take a look at is just your journey here tonight. When you drove up the hill, this is a historic structure. I don't know if you knew that, or not historic, it's art structure. I don't know if you guys knew that, if you were here at the time when this was built. This was the eyebrows on the hill. And oh, how wonderful and beautiful it is. And it was built by, or designed by a ship's architect. I don't know if you know that. If you look at especially if you look at the ceiling tiles, not necessarily in here, but more in our offices, it's slightly curved, ever so slightly curved. The building, you can't really tell from the outside, but from the inside, you can tell it's curved. And it's supposed to be, they call it the eyebrows and hill. It's watching down upon the city of Thousand Oaks. So as you came up here, you saw that. And then you parked your car. And then when you were walking down the steps, even though it was dark, who was on the side of the steps? Parker, right? Our partnership with the Arts Council of the Canal Valley. So he's out there. So we actually got like a sculpture out there. And then most of you did come through here, but traditionally we would go through the hallway. And what do we usually have there? Artwork. Very good, Chuck. $5 for you. So you go through our gallery, and then when you're in here, I don't know if you guys even if you remember this. This podium. This podium was handmade from old Dos Vientos barnwood. I don't know if you know that. So that was something we did a few years ago because we thought it was kind of cool. And you look at it in our board meetings, and no one's pointing out every single time, look at that piece of art, look at that piece of art. It's a very functional, beautiful, subtle, informal piece of art. So again, art is all over the place within the Canal Rec and Park District. So let's talk about the process that we go through when we have any sort of projects, or even with programming too. And it doesn't matter, small, large, new buildings, new parks, or even just renovations. Every single project to some extent has a process that we go through with art. And I don't say, it's not a formal checklist. We don't have a checklist. We say, oh, did we do this? Did we do that? Did we do that? No, it's just something that's ingrained upon our DNA as recreation professionals and park planners. This is something we always talk about. So, and then we always welcome whether it's a board member has an idea for something, or it's a citizen we've never even talked to before. They have said, oh, this would be really cool if you did that. Oh, that's a good idea, and we'll incorporate it, if it really works. So I'll go through the process. I'm going to use McCrae Ranch as an example as we go show you or remind you how we went through the process for that. Now, McCrae Ranch, awesome, awesome facility. Took a hell of a lot of work to figure out what we were doing there and how we were going to do it. We sat down with Wyatt at the beginning and our staff and Wyatt, well, brainstorming, what do we want this to be? We were dreaming, just what could it be? How do we want to present it? Where can we go with this? And what kind of programs we want to do? So that goes into the questions. We asked her, we didn't know right away it wasn't like, oh, we know we want to do a visitor center. Remember too, this started as we were going to have the lake in a conference center and all. Yes, sir. You got a question?
I was just going to comment that originally the house right next door was bunkhouse. No, anyway,
The caretaker's house was
going to be the
Right.
visitor center.
right. Yeah, yes, that's exactly right. So that's
Art history.
thank you for stealing my thunder there. That's
Oh,
okay.
no.
Yeah, it's okay.
I did it.
It's okay.
Do I
But-
get money too?
Yes, you get, no, you give Chuck $5 to one night. So we were dreaming because it said the master plan originally had, like I said, was getting back, take 2 steps back, had a lake and a conference center and all these other different amenities, because that's what the board had envisioned with the staff beforehand. And so now so we were starting from scratch. What do we want this to be? So we asked us all sorts of questions on what we want to do with it. And then we decided, hey, let's have some sort of hub visitor center, and it expands from there. And as George so correctly pointed out, one of the things we looked at, we go, oh my, the caretaker's residence, perfect, exact same size, what we want. This is going to be great. This is going to be awesome. And we had some friends from the City of Thousand building officials go, you're going to spend every single dime you have on making that place safe for people. Just build something right next to it. We're like, good idea, thanks. So again, getting input from everybody who's out there. We did so much research. We took staff and Wyatt and our consultant went out to many different places and asked, well, how do you do it? How do you present things? We went to the William S. Hart House. We went to Will Rogers Estate. And I'm even trying to remember some other places we went, but it was fun. That was so much fun doing that. Just asking them, what do you do and how do you do it? And learn, because learn some things that we didn't know about. They were just in a nutshell. I remember the gal from the Will Rogers said, you don't want just a house, because people are going to go to the house like, cool, and they're not coming back. Because it's just, I've seen the house. You've got to have more than just a house. You've got to have interpretive panels and all these other educational things out there. We said, good, thank you for that idea. And then the amount of research and data that we had we had thousands and thousands of pictures that Wyatt had. We had, I think it was 65 hours of audio tape that we had to go through. And doing all that research and digitizing that to preserve all that, and then to actually, you've all seen it's almost a 13-minute movie. That 13-minute movie, probably took, I don't know, a couple hundred man hours, maybe even 1,000 man hours of going through things to pick out the right photo that goes with the audio that when Joel was talking, and then, getting Bruce Boxleitner involved to do the, to be the MC of the movie. Tons of work went into that. And so then some input from users and partners. What we did with that, who else but to go to, we went next door to National Park Service and said, give me some help. How do you guys do it? And so a lady over there who has since, Amy Yee, she has since retired. She was in charge of their visitor centers in the area. She gave us so much recommendations and guidelines and things to do, and looking through our data, giving us so much help. Wyatt would talk to potential partners that he had, that the context that he has out there. We also talked to the Stagecoach Museum. How do you do these things? It's amazing the amount of thought that goes into it. Like I said, I love museums. I love national parks, but actually to be on the other side and actually put one together, that's a lot of work, a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work. It just, even for example, talking to Amy next door, and I was, oh man, I've been to every national park, west of in Mississippi, and I'm the type of guy who'll read everything, and my family hates me for it. And that's not funny. And then, but Amy was talking to me because she's telling me about colors and what draws, all these other different things. You're like, just blowing your mind that, no, you just don't put it down in a text and you're done. She's like, no, here's all the things you got to think about and the placement. And like I always like to show everybody too, like next time you go to McRae, if I haven't done this for you, when you're going from the like the administrative area or the lobby, for lack of a better word, before you go to the exhibit area, when you're looking, if I'm looking at in the middle is the thing of Joel with the lasso above him, and Amy made us do this. When you're looking at this, you see the words Joel McRae, Joel McRae, Joel McRae. Very subtle, but you see it in 3 different areas before you walk into the room. So your brain tells you you're in Joel McRae. It's fascinating to me. Anyway, I'll continue on. But with all these things, we do continuous outreach and sharing with everybody where we are in the steps. And we're getting feedback from them, just continuous, because we don't say we're experts in this. We'd love to hear from our partners, our users, and our staff, and what needs to be done. And then so we get the feedback, and then even some of the places like you think you got it right, and you think you got it 100% right, and still at McRae there was a couple surprises, and there's good surprises. One day we showed up, and Wyatt had the idea of making a brand, the cattle brand, and sticking it into the concrete, all by himself. No one else thought of it. He said he was walking over to check on the guys one day and says, hey, use this before the concrete dries. Put it here, put it there. What a great touch that was. And then even our contractor, and if you look at if you're in the big room where we show the movies, we have those big barn doors and the wainscot that's around. The barn doors are actually supposed to be the same color as the wainscot. It's kind of a grayish color. And he did it, he put it up. We all looked at it and go, it doesn't work. It looks bad. And okay, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Then we were in the trailer talking to having a regular project meeting, and the subcontractor comes like, you guys got to see this. What are you talking about? Went over there. He had water blasted the gray paint off of the barn doors, and he said, perfect. He goes, I'm going to paint this stuff and then water blast it so it looks almost like the wainscoting, but it's in between. It looks natural and raw rather than brand new or perfectly painted. So total surprise, but that's something we got input from the contractor on that. So I thought that was really interesting. So that's like, again, we do go through every single project. At some form, we go through this process and we welcome everybody's input. I said, if it works, we'll definitely do it. So where in the district do we have all these things? Now, I gave you guys a handout because, again, we could talk for hours and hours and hours about art, education history, and supporting programming and partnerships. So there's a list that we have there of everything that we could think of, all the parks that are there. And this is our opinion on stuff. Some of the things we had, I took off, some we added back. There's a lot of opinion out there because, again, beauty, art or beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So I'll go over just some of the highlights. And if you look, so we just did quickly. So every park that's on there that has because some of them are blank, but every park that has something, we put a little dot out there. So you can see it's throughout the whole district. It's just not just in one place or just at a museum. So it is all over the place. Again, this is just our opinions. It's not to saying it's right or wrong, but it's just our opinions that we have out there. So I'll go over some of the highlights from the spreadsheet that I handed out there. Special facilities, we already talked a lot about McRae Ranch, but then even with Chumash and Stagecoach and Botanic Garden, really it says it in a nutshell. And I'd put this on the spreadsheet. There's just too many to mention. It's ridiculous the amount of art, education, history, and programming that are out there, whether it's school tours or the sculptures in the garden. There's just so much stuff going on these facilities with our partner organizations that it's through the roof, all the stuff that we do out there. It's amazing. I'll talk about parks. Just give you some examples here. We think this is art in parks because we're parks guys. Upper left, that's Newberry Gateway Park. We love, that's that swale that the city of Thousand Oaks did. Remember, because there's no storm drain in the street there. So they took out a chunk and they did all these other different things that I think it's beautiful. I really do. It's a huge upgrade to what was there. It's totally beautiful and it's functional. The plaque over on the right-hand side is in the lobby at Borchard Community Park. Worked with the Conejo Valley Historical Society to get some information from Miriam Sprankling out there. And so we put this plaque out there to give everyone an idea of, well, who is the Borchard family and why were they here? And why is this named Borchard Community Park? And why is this Borchard Road? Bottom is Sapui. Sapui's got a ton of different art things, but we took this as an aerial shot. Even the gabion walls, which are down here, these are retaining walls there. Instead of just putting CMU block wall up there, we said, this is kind of cool. This is different looking and it's neat, it's different, it's fun, it's exciting. So we think as park professionals, we think that's a pretty cool looking art out there. Other places where I think we have our most opportunities or quantity, I guess you'd say, in all our parks is our playgrounds. Our playgrounds, what we try to do, again, we put a lot of thought process into it. We try to make everyone unique. And I don't remember about your guys' kids, but my kids, it was always, I want to go to the ranch park or the farm park or the spiderweb park or, yes, sir.
Or Wildwood Fort.
Wildwood Fort, yeah, which that's why I tore it down. There's always, I mean, the kids know that. The kids don't say, I want to go to Kimber Park. They don't know what Kimber Park is. They know what the playground looks like. So we try to be a little creative, and whether it's like an art education history, we try to incorporate some of that in almost every single playground that we do. Example here, we've got, that's at Borchard Community Park in the upper left-hand corner. We try to make it like a farm theme or ranch theme. Walnut Grove is next to that on the right-hand side. We did a car theme because it's right next to the 101 freeway. And then Spring Meadow, we thought very vibrant colors over at Spring Meadow to kind of bring out what the playground looks like. Also, we'll also have unique play elements. Dos Vianos Neighborhood Park, again, with a nod to the ranch that used to be there. We got like the little stagecoach and some farm animals. Over at Sapui, we have some activity panels, and we have where you go and take a look at the little insects, and a lot of the panels are interpretation or education, tell you what's going on so the kids can learn. What else we got? Oh, and other playgrounds we have, one of my favorites, I'll just highlight this one on the right-hand side, Fiore, home of Conejo Valley Little League. If you remember, I think most of us were at the ribbon cutting for that, but that was a baseball theme. And even taking it to the next level, it was the two baseballs and the wooden bat with nothing on the wooden bat. And I remember when they installed it, you go, I don't even know really what that is. It's supposed to be a baseball bat, but it really doesn't look like a baseball bat. So luckily in-house, we have an artiste, Tim Doer, who's very good at writing or calligraphy, I guess you'd call her, or stenciling. So if you look at just how it'd say Louisville Slugger on a regular bat, this one says Conejo Valley Little League. And then we surreptitiously stole the president of Conejo Valley Little League's signature and got it. And then Tim, kind of free drew it next to it. So it looks, like you would have, Cody Bellinger or someone sign a bat. So Will Hayes had signed that bat. And the best thing was, about the day or two after we did that, Will called me and I don't really, I mean, he's a good guy, but I mean, it's not like we're great friends or anything. We just worked a little bit on this project. He called me a couple of days after that. He goes, I was walking to the baseball field and I just could see him. He was walking down and he went, I think that's my signature on that bat. And so he called us and said, I go, yep, that's for you, man. Thanks. You were the president during all this and you helped us all happen. But it's that finishing touch and taking it to that next level that we're really proud of, that we were able to do that. And it was a collaboration between us, Conejo Valley Little League, and even just in-house doing it is amazing. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, supporting programming that we have out there. So what does support arts education and history? So just even, we've got, dance classes and ballet classes, which is very, cultural events at all the different community centers. We offer so many programs, whether they're music lessons or this is a culinary class. We consider that, education too, that they're learning something, they're learning skills. And then we have the special events, like this is, the bottom left is the Dino Dig over at the Caneo Community Center, where they're learning quite a bit of things about history and dinosaurs through our different special events, or, touch a truck too. They hopefully learn a lot too. And then, to me, here's the wow factors of our arts education history and, that we have as far as on the recreation side. The Hillcrest Center of the Arts and the Global Adult Center just take it to the nth degree of what they do. And it's obvious, to me, obvious things, but whether, with the education for the health and wellness fests or the musicals that they do, or, history and music comes alive, and then the galleries that they have out there. I mean, it's just, I mean, that's what they're built for, and that's what they do. Both Scott and especially Ian do a fantastic job of bringing it to the next level. And then even now, just one just popped in my head because I was talking to Ian earlier on. In addition to performing out there, quite a few of our patrons learn how to work a soundboard and how to work a light, and doing striking and building sets and all that. So they learn so much beyond just performing. It's amazing. And I said, and the global, Patty does an amazing job out there too. And that's what her patrons crave is this type of thing. So it's fantastic the supporting programs that we have out there. And then even some other, again, we talked about McRae, they do a lot of, they do movie nights, and Crawley House, I mean, just in itself, the Crawley House is art, I think, as if it's building architecture. But we do, the therapeutic unit does, life skill classes out there. And then even our outdoor unit, whether it's in Wildwood or some other areas, doing nature hikes and summer camps, and there's just so many things that they learn, or again, sometimes it's in your face because they're sitting at an amphitheater telling you what you should be doing. And sometimes it's just learning because you're there. Let's see, what else we got here? Oh, okay, so like just kind of finishing up. So like one of the things we do too is one we're really proud of is how community driven the process is for art education and history. So here we just, an example is Banyan, we actually work, for lack of a better word, we work fairly intensely with the neighbors and the school, because the school is right next door to us, on what should we do, what should it look like, and again, asking us through that whole process. And I think the culmination when it came right down to it was I think the most formal thing or most in your direct thing we did was the last 10 lineal feet of a pathway, because this is how the kids from that neighborhood get to school. We decided, you know what, on the ribbon cutting day, come on kids, you can paint your own name there, do whatever you want. We had, as you can see, there's commentary, and we had our own, it was imprinted, it says, welcome to Banyan Elementary School. As you're walking that way, this way, it says, welcome to Banyan Neighborhood Park. But then the kids did their own things, and they just thoroughly enjoyed it. And to this day, it's still there. And so, the kids every day they walk to school, they get to see that. They're really proud of what they do. But so that was a fantastic partnership we had with, I said, the schools and the neighbors for that. Let's see. Oh, and then the gratitude circle. We bring that one up because we've got plaques and signage and recognition. We get comments or requests all the time from people. Well, my dad really liked this park. He'd like to put a plaque. So this is our more formal way to do it, and they're good and bad. This came out of, if you remember, the huge major tree that was there, we had to be taken down. Yeah. So we went like, well, what are we going to do? That's like the center of the center of the park that's in the center and the most used in the whole community. We got to do something there. It's such a beautiful place. And our former park planner, Denise Johns, came up with the idea. She was inspired by Maya Lin, who's an architect, a designer. She actually did the Vietnam Memorial Wall, but she also did something, it was a Juanita College in Pennsylvania. It was like a peace circle, I think it was called. So that kind of inspired Denise to design this. So with, from the 4 points of northeast, west, and south points, and just how you get in there and the peacefulness of it was a wonderful, wonderful project that we did. I think and much like, and we'll talk about the Healing Garden now too, but much like at Canal Creek North, I think with the Gratitude Circle, it's something that's there, and sometimes you don't even notice it. So it's kind of, we really enjoy that. Now the Healing Garden, I'm going to finish with the Healing Garden because, as you well know, it's probably one of the most epic challenges that we had, and to one, for a lot of different reasons, from what it was born out of, and the timing we did, and what we were able to achieve and accomplish, and the amount of community input that we had, whether it was from the victims' families, from the survivors, from the sheriff's office, all the studies and research that we had to do, using symbology, using numerology to represent what was out there. And then the feelings that it would instill upon people or inspire people if they visit it. But at the same time, you could take someone from out of town and they could walk right past it, and to them, it's part of the park. But it does hold a special place for those people that know what it's supposed to be about. Or if someone wants to, if someone from out of town didn't know, we have our plaques there to educate them of the history of why this is here and why it's such a special place. So again, this is a huge culmination with the community and with everybody. And I think this is really the almost like the #1 place that we've had out there that really culminates what we've been doing and how the process we go with it and who we work with. So again, I talk for hours about this. Love it, absolutely love art education history and the programs that we do and all the partnerships that we have with people. Kudos to the ad hoc committee, to Sue and Nellie, really inspired us to, like I said, this is fun. There's a lot of energy we're going on, and it's never going to stop. And it's always something I think we're going to continue on doing. And we think it would be behoove us to maybe on like an annual basis meet with the ad hoc committee and just kind of review where we at. And that way it'd be like a formal way to say what projects are coming up. What are you thinking about? Why are you thinking about that way? What's going on? What kind of programs do you have going on, Rochelle? That's sort of just sit down and BS for a half hour, 45 minutes about what we've done, what we're doing, and just to kind of keep it up throughout the years. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you,
I didn't
Mr.
get
Hare.
any
Excellent,
claps.
excellent presentation.
Melissa? No, you're not clapping? Okay, cool. Thank you.
Director Lang, you have a question or comment?
Yes, both. And being that I was intimately involved representing the Canal Recreation and Park District for art in the community, and some of you might remember the name Lois Zena. She was a mayor at the time. She was representing the city and I was representing the Park District. We came up with that piece of art in the adult center, out there with the grandpa and the 2 children reading. Yeah, 3. That was part of my contribution. But no. But that at the time was a big growing, potentially growing program. And then I guess the city maybe canceled that particular program. I don't know. But that was a collaborative effort. We also had, there's nobody from the school district that I remember on the core committee, but then we had, opportunities for the community to come in and make comments on the little, come on, art people, models, but they're called zouettes or.
Little models that like which
Yeah,
one they like.
there's a name for it. I should remember.
Does anyone know a sculptor?
No.
Well, we know what you're talking about.
Anyway, the community was invited for, I don't know how many days to come and look at those models and then make their comments. And that was the winning one that we ended up with. But that's right on our property, in front of the adult and teen center areas. And it wasn't noted on your sheet.
I apologize. We tried to get them all. We tried to get them all, but I don't know if we got them all, so.
But anyway,
Yep.
that's art in the community, and I don't know if that makes sense for the park district to kind of initiate that program again with the city.
Well, the city has their own program, and that they actually have a process that goes through with art in the community. And so that's one of the discussions we had with the ad hoc committee, was similar to what you're bringing up right now. And we said that, and I'm speaking for Directors Holt and Cusworth here, but one of the things is like, hey, we have so much and we do so much, to have a formalized program like the city does. It's fairly cumbersome, you know, and it would probably require more staff work to do that, to actually get it, you know, like yours might have been a one-off, but the city, I was very involved with the Huberth Memorial that used to be up here. Remember the tree that was here and that got moved over to the city hall. I was very involved with that. It was a cumbersome, difficult process. Some of the other things that the city has done, same thing that I was involved. It's fairly, and then it's like you're never right. You know, you could say, you know, half the people say I like this and the other half of people say I like that, and why did you pick this and why did you spend this money, my taxpayer money? So we were saying, let's think about, that's why we did this presentation, and let's think more organically of that. There's so many hundreds and hundreds of things that we do out there, whether it's through programming or our partnerships or actually put into the parks, that we felt like we do enough, you know, and rather than having a formalized program and having statues in the park.
Okay.
Thank you. Director Cusworth?
So I appreciate that your enthusiasm for all of this was so incredibly visible. It was like a child talking about their first trip to Disneyland.
I can talk about
That
that too.
you just, it was exuding from every portion of your body. So, of course, this is my thing completely. And I recognize, of course, all of our community partners and everything, because that's what brought me to CRPD. That's what I love. And I did want to say, this is actually building is a historical landmark. It's on the historical landmark tour.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was, because it's
Yeah.
a city building, yeah.
It is a historical landmark, so I forgot which one it is. But in reference to a lot of what George was saying, I think that a lot of what we do and what I was interested was doing subtle things that would bring more art history and education into the park so that people are getting that without really knowing it. Because of course we have all of our partners. If you want to know about history, you can go to Stagecoach Inn, but somebody has to consciously do that. But if they just walk into the Borchard Center and there's something about the Borchards, that's kind of an unconscious thing that they're doing. Or if there was an artifact about the Borchards that was somewhat sculptural, a plow or something that was at the Borchard Center with something, that's an unconscious way to bring history into the community. And the same with art. I was this is just an idea I'm throwing out, may not happen. I was down in LA and they had a park that had a bunch of these outdoor meant for park musical instruments. And I thought, oh, you know, we're going to be redoing the Canal Community Park. That might be a cool thing because we have concerts there. And, you know, it's like meant to be outside and do, I think they might have some. Like
Yep, we have
that
some at
over
Old
there
Meadows.
Marcy,
Old Meadows.
don't they?
Old Meadows
Yeah,
does, and
Old
we
Meadows.
probably have about one or two other playgrounds that have that.
Yeah. So those are kind of cool things. Again, you're bringing the art in, you're making it interactive. It's very subtle. It's like what I said, people can go to the Botanic Garden. They're meaning to go to the Botanic Garden. But Banyan Park is actually a Botanic Garden. All it needs is signs. And so simple things to add like that. Though I still wouldn't mind formal things like a sculpture, but you know, we'll see about that. We didn't want to start throwing a bunch of sculptures in all of the parks. It would have to be a need and a thought and a reason that you would have something. but also just space. Like here we have gallery space, and it was just somewhat to just think like, okay, we're going to be building a new building over at Caneo Community. Do we want to have space there for some sort of gallery? Do we want to do that? Is there space for that? Do we want to have some sort of a timeline that'll bring in history? Do we want to have some type of, educational portion? It's just something to always be thinking about, which I think, as Tom has said, especially with our landscape architecture and everything, our parks are already incredibly artistic. We've incorporated all these things, but that doesn't mean that it's something you can't still continually be thinking about and adding to very simple, subtle touches that just add so much more. I mean, even in there, it didn't have to be a gallery right there, but somebody coming to go and talk at the parks or do something, they're all of a sudden there, oh, we've got art. We didn't have to go to an art gallery. We've got it right here that people didn't even anticipate doing. So I really appreciate your enthusiasm, Tom. This is something I highly believe in because our parks are public space, and subtly bringing in art history and education is a really nice movement. It's not just a place to go and play. It's a place that you can also learn. And so thank you very much. It's a wonderful presentation. And I'm glad that you were inspired at our meeting. I kind of felt like it was not that inspiring, but obviously by your stance, you're very inspired. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I make a real quick comment?
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
Okay, talking about the Caneo Community Center and little gallery, or possibly something that would bring back history. That was the very first community center that was really used as a community center. Old Meadows had the meeting rooms and different things, and Casey Kasem, one of the big draws of the day, used to perform, and hundreds and hundreds of people would show up for his performances there. So I can see, history of the old Caneo Community Center somehow depicted in some way or some room.
Maybe, again, you can't put everything everywhere.
No, it's
just like Tom was saying with McCrae Ranch. You kind of brainstorm, you're kind of thinking of different things, but then this would be one of the things that we'd bring into the brainstorming. Hey, how are we bringing in art? How are we bringing in this? How are we bringing in this? Can't do it all. Or, maybe, do we want to have a sculpture here? Do we want to have a fountain here? Do we want to have these things here? How are we bringing it into our park? Which they're doing, but I was just saying, you can always do more. Subtle things. So yeah, it's a lot of good stuff.
Thank you. Director Holt, did you have any questions or comments?
No, I don't.
Okay. Director Huffer.
No, thanks for the presentation, and as Molly said, your enthusiasm is well appreciated.
Yeah, I knew if I let everybody else talk that I wouldn't have to talk so long. So thank you, Mr. Hare, for that. I was also thinking along the lines as Director Cusworth that the parks themselves, in my mind, are a artistic contribution on behalf of you and your staff, most recently, obviously, your predecessors, the Park District as a whole, which I think is really a great testament because people don't really think of them as artwork, but they also realize that they just kind of fit. You've talked many times about the coolest house in the neighborhood, how it just kind of is part of that in the Caneo Community Park there, and how they all just fit. And I think for the reason that we don't get a lot of complaints that how in the world did you ever figure out that this was going to go here, or that you designed it this way, that there is a lot of thought, whether it is the architecture, the structures, the landscape architecture, working with the neighborhood. I think there's a lot of that. And then what you're talking about tonight is like the finer points of, or maybe the more traditional art, or whether it's subtle or not, that you're kind of highlighting that. But I just wanted to compliment you and the staff just on your contributions to make our parks and our community artistic in whatever way that happens, and it certainly makes a big difference. So
Sure,
thank you.
I'll let, and I'll just like, and Andrew actually had that, any park that he renovated, he put on there how beautiful it was and how art it was. I was like, dude, you know,
Yeah,
yeah, I agree, but it's, that's that sort of thing. So, but no, I totally agree with you, But
Yeah.
like I said, we could go on forever of what we think is art, so.
yeah. And I think your use of the Healy Garden is part of that, where those here in the community are intimately aware of why it's there and what it represents. And yet passersby just see it as a beautiful section of the park. And I think it's a classic example of just how the design within our parks is represented. So thank you. Director Lang, you had another comment?
One more. There's another big piece of artwork in the Canal Creek North, and that's the fountains, those pylons. Was it? A little late. Thank you.
And thank you for this list, by the way. Very, very nice. Thank you. Okay, next we have items from the public. Mr. Segedy, do we have any folks interested in speaking this evening? Okay, thank you. And next I will entertain a motion to approve our agenda or any suggestions for modifying. Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Huffer, Chuck Huffer, thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Well, moving on. Next, we have a consent calendar, items 6A and 6B, the approval of minutes of January 21st and approval of warrants. Any comments, questions, or a motion to approve? Director Huffer,
I'd like to move approval of the consent calendar, items A and B.
thank you. And I saw over here Director
Yeah, I'll
Cuthbert.
second that.
Okay, thank you. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Okay, the consent calendar carries. I do not see any deferred matters here, so we'll continue on to items for discussion. I see nothing there, so we'll continue on to new items. Our first one is item 9A, California Drought Water Parks Climate Coastal Protection and Outdoor Access for All Act of 2018. Per capita grant program and deed restrictions. Mr. General Manager, you guys immediately defer to Mr. Hare.
That's
Okay,
Mr.
I
Hare.
saw that
Yep.
deferral. So Mr. Hare,
Thanks, Chair Nichols, members of the board. Back in October of 19, we adopted a resolution, the board adopted a resolution talking about our participation in the state's per capita grant program. We initially proposed playground upgrades at 3 different parks. I think due to the pandemic, things got a little slow with the state getting back to us, and we went back and forth with some language and what could be done. So from that, we reduced it to 2 park sites that most basically fit rather than 3 park sites at South Shore Hills and Lang Ranch Neighborhood Park. And then the state most recently sent us these deed restrictions. And in a nutshell, it just guarantees that the grant funds will be used for the purposes that's intended to, and then those purposes, playgrounds, will be there for a long time. So we need to sign this in order to get it's a little over $260,000. With that, I'm available for questions.
thank you, Mr. Hare. Do we have a question? Yes, Director Huffer.
I think you sort of addressed this already, Tom, but when I first looked at this, said deed restrictions, I said, my gosh, what is the state asking us to do? Basically, all we're doing is saying, yes, it's going to continue to be a park
Correct.
until, what, 2048 or something like that.
Correct, right, yeah, and then we're gonna use the money for playgrounds, not something, it's like playgrounds and surrounding amenities, not that we're gonna go build a parking lot with it.
Okay, so it's not changing the nature of these parks.
No.
It's just,
Guaranteeing we're gonna do what we do.
all right, thank you.
Director Holt, did you have a question?
No, I don't. Thank
Oh, okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I had a question. I do remember you bringing this up previously, Mr. Hare. I guess my question is this approval of deed restrictions the first time that we've had to do something like this to accept a grant from the state?
Yes, but looking at other state employees, it's good to, Melissa said this is gonna be a more common thing, getting grants from the state, that this is something that will need to be done.
Okay, so,
This is, yeah, the first time in my memory that that we've done something like this.
so this is a precedent for us, in
Yes.
essence. Okay. And with that said, considering that this would be, I'm guessing about a 30-year deed restriction, I didn't get the exact years, a 30-year deed restriction, I'm just questioning in my mind, not right or wrong, but is the juice worth the squeeze, for using a phrase? In other words,
It's a,
you know,
it's a fair question.
to lock, and again, not that we have any other plans for this part, I was saying, but to lock down the use of this property for its intended purpose, intended purpose at this point, for this amount of money, and I think it was like maybe $90,000 at one park, but you're locking it down. It just doesn't seem, it seems like the state is getting more benefit, so to speak. They're getting 30-year guarantee for $90,000. And then the follow-up with that would be if we were to apply for another grant, does this 30-year period have to pass before we can apply for another grant and get it, and then again, go through the same exercise of having to have a deed restriction?
Actually, there's the state employee.
I can jump on that. So it would not prevent an additional grant. That's not the intent of it. What this is really trying to prevent, they've had previous audits find things where bond money in particular was granted to entities, and then something later down the road happened to the property where the property changed hands, and then they changed something on the property. And so this was to give a heads up to the next owner of the property that there was an improvement or some sort of asset on the property that was funded by this bond. And the time, I think, is usually based on the fact that you're paying for bonds for a certain amount of years. So it was more about them making sure for if they're paying interest and everything on that debt, that the asset is still there. And if there were a situation where we needed to give that property over to some other purpose, it would be something that we would report back to the bond managers of this, and we would refund a portion and something like that.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. So there is a remedy in place that you could pay back
Correct.
if you needed to do some because I'm just thinking, sometimes we've talked a lot with the whole general plan coming up. There may be some needs to, move things around. And I hate to have locked us, as great as the opportunity is, I hate to lock us in a position where we say, darn, I wish I had thought about that, to do that. And then this is just more of an open question for whomever might be able to answer it. Do we have any existing deed restrictions on parklands that restrict their use as parks? Like in some instances we do for open space when we get dedications and it is, deed restricted for use as open space. Do we have any parks that would fall into that same category?
Well, the one I can think of right off the top of my head is the property across the street from the McCrae Ranch that is still the McCrae Ranch, but it was originally, we acquired it through a tax incentive program at the state. So it's Shea Homes was going to build a bunch of homes there. And we were able to get it through some sort of tax credit program for the residential builders. And because of that, because the state forewent a bunch of tax, we have a deed restriction. It can only be used for park purposes, or we have to tell the state and theoretically give it back to the state if they wanted it. So that's one I can think of off the top of my head. I'd have to, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some others, but there's nothing that kind of is sort of ever present, because generally we don't do anything but parks with our parks. So,
well, yeah, like I said, it's not that we're,
Yeah.
but again, this whole general plan,
right.
I say cloud in a good way, that it's unsettled as far as where things are going to land. But not knowing where things will land, we may be subject to having to make some decisions and changes to either respond to the city or others to do some things. And like I said, I think it's probably, you're right, that it's more of an anomaly if it were the case rather than routine, because it's usually just a land use designation rather than a deed restriction. So, yes, Director Lang?
Yeah, how about Oak Brook Regional? We got that from the county. Is there any restrictions associated with that?
I don't recall if there are. It's possible that the county may have some reversionary interest in it. If, the county says, we'll give it to you, but if you don't want it,
I don't know.
we
I
get a
was
chance
just-
to have it
That was
back.
one I thought of because.
Yeah, I do not know. I don't know.
Yes, Director Huffer.
It just seems to me, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a real estate person, but it seems to me that if a couple of our properties now, not only are they zoned as parks and recreational property, but now there's a deed restriction, I would think it's actually a good thing, because it's one more impediment to somebody coming along and saying, well, we really want that land to put in a 10-story apartment building. So if anything, I think it's good. Maybe we should get more of these restrictions on more of our parks.
Well, in terms of the general plan, so I will say that the general plan still has the Parks Initiative that applies to properties that with the general plan designation, parks, golf course, and open space. And remember, that requires a vote of the people to change that. And so whatever the council does with the general plan, that doesn't alter the existence of the Parks Initiative that's there still. So, so there would have to be a vote of the people to change. Not all of our parks have the general plan designation, parks, golf course, and open space. There's actually some that don't, but most of them do.
To be somewhat contrary, I mean, what was it 6 or 8 years ago where the voters were told that, okay, we can't build any more housing units because of this, and then the city has changed the rules, and it seems to me that if we have one more restriction on our property, it's one more safety valve for us.
In that respect too, but I'll also flip that around the other side and say, if the general plan were to make such a thing where it would be beneficial to the district to swap a parcel of parkland to be better off with another piece of land. However, that particular park is clouded with a deed restriction that would prevent us from doing it. Now it decreases the value of that land for other uses. Again, we'd want to keep all of our parks, but I say if we could be better off for some other reason, it just would make it difficult.
I mean, there are all kinds of what ifs and speculations.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Enhanced flexibility.
Yeah, but I am a little more relieved just to know that we could buy out of this, so to speak, if we had to, which is good. In the meantime, we intend to keep it as a park for 30+ years, so it's not like we're changing plans for any reason. Okay, that was all my questions. Were there any other questions or comments? Okay, with that, is there anyone who would care to make a motion regarding approval of the deed restrictions for the aforementioned grants? Yes, Director Cusworth.
I'll make a motion that we approve the deed restrictions required under the California Drought, Water, Parks, Climate, Coastal Protection, and Outdoor Access.
I'll second.
All right, I have a second from Director Holt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to 9B. We have revision of a personnel policy manual. General Manager Friedel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Nichols, members of the board. This will actually be a tag team with some talent. I'm going to take Melissa's thunder and get to introduce, I want to introduce Adriana Guzman because she's on the line, and you guys that have been in prior labor negotiations will recognize her. She's our partner at Liebert Cassidy Whitmore, our counsel we've had for, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years?
I don't know, maybe only going back to like 2016.
That's
Not
it?
that long.
Does it just seem
Wow.
longer than that?
Yeah, it feels like you've been at 3 or 4 labor negotiations with us.
Yeah.
Well, 2020 lasted
Yeah,
5
it's
years.
Yeah, is that what it is? And then, of course, Shelley's available on the phone call. But the kick it all off is going to be Melissa Smith, our Management Services Administrator.
Sure, and this is a long time in the making, years, and so I'm going to give complete credit to Shelley and Adriana because I've only been here like a year, but it's been a lot of work. Director Huffer did bring up some comments and suggestions, so in addition to kind of a general summary that Shelley's going to give, there's a couple amendments that they think they could add into what you're seeing in the packet that might provide that clarity, so they'll go over that as well. And with that, I give it to Shelley.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so you'll see that this is a new refresh of our already existing personnel manual. And it includes, I know, a lot of word changes, but what we try to do is clarify things throughout the policy, to clarify the policy language, to spell things out as you've seen, numbers and things like that. Clarified language that has been previously negotiated in MOUs, which is now brought forth to our current personnel policy. Items that were moved from the MOU to the personnel policy. Updated legal changes that have taken place over the years, including things like FMLA and harassment and those kind of things. And we've also tried to clarify, especially the definitions of types of employees. You'll see in there full-time and part-time and fixed term employees, as it's been confusing, the terms that we've used. With that, I will just say one of the things that Director Huffer brought up was on the definition of, or the use of, regular employee. So you'll see we have probationary employees, which are full-time employees in their first year. And then we have regular full-time employees, which is intended to describe employees after they have met their 1-year probation period. And then part-time employees who are less than full-time. So the amendment that we would propose on page 12 is two simple things. On 4.1, we will keep in regular for full-time. And in 4.2, where we've already stricken regular from the title, we will also strike regular from the very first word of that paragraph. And that, I think, will clarify any further discussion of the term regular later on in the policy. And then secondly, he brought up there were several indications in the policy, for instance, in sick leave or in when we require a medical certification, where we refer to a doctor, a medical doctor, a physician, a healthcare provider. So for consistency, we will change those items to simply say healthcare provider, so it is consistent. And with that, unless Adriana, you have anything else to add, if there are any further questions or clarifications?
I don't have anything further to add other than the reference to healthcare provider is to make it consistent with what the FMLA allows. So a person can be, I believe there's with a certain religious group has a healthcare provider that may not be a licensed medical provider. And so that's why we're using that term healthcare provider, because of what the FMLA allows an employee to seek medical services from an individual who may not be a licensed medical provider.
Thank you for that clarification and explanation, and Mr. Huffer for the amendments. Okay, with that, is there any comments or questions either on the document itself or the process? Yes, Director Huffer.
I think this is for you, Shelley, but you noted that several items in the personnel policy manual were moved over from the MOU, including the drug policy, and I think there may have been a couple of others which made sense. I know I think we started that 4 years ago or something like that. But is this policy manual anything that needs to be approved by the union, or is it just a matter of we provide the information to them, what the updates are, but it doesn't require their approval for us to approve it, does it?
So we actually did meet with them ahead of this before we brought it to this board, just to clarify any questions. There were a few items that they did bring up that we believe would be subject to negotiation for the represented group, because remember, this personnel policy manual applies to all employees. So that may be things that they bring up in that specific process. But we did meet with them to clarify some of their questions and go over those things.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may as well add to that, some of the language that was brought over, we had already negotiated, would be taken out of the MOU. And so that was simply making it consistent with what we'd already negotiated.
You may recall in prior MOU revisions, we've tried to bring, clarify the language and bring it down to be as succinct as possible without the duplication. So some of those things came over to and some of them were already in the personnel policy.
Thank you. Director Lang, did you have a comment?
Yes.
Question?
On the probationary period, as noted at the first sheet, from 6 months to 1 year, and then on page 86, what was the reason that that's been increased to a year?
So that was that.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, you want me to take that, Shelley, or?
Go ahead.
That is the result of negotiations, right? From 6 years ago or something, 8 years ago? It just hadn't actually made its way into the personnel
Okay.
policy, yeah.
But what were the reasons then, backing up 6 years? They didn't get enough?
So it, I believe, had a little bit to do with the economy and the ability for the district's interest in having a little bit longer of a window to sort of evaluate and determine whether somebody was a good fit for the organization. So it had been 6 months. So it's now a year, and it just gives folks a better chance to determine whether, we're a good long-term marriage.
And if I recall, it also had to deal with the fact that different events occur throughout the year, and they're wanting to see how people responded or had the opportunity to participate in certain events throughout the year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further? Yes, Director Cusworth.
I was pretty impressed at the amount of work that went into this. There were quite a few changes and clarifications, and I was just wondering, how often do you do this? Is there a regular time period that you update this manual, or is it just done as needed? And how long has it been since you've updated this manual?
Well, this has been a work in process for a couple of years, but I have to say, I went back to look, I think it was 2003, the last time it was a full makeover. So I would hope that we would maybe do it every couple of years. I mean, there are legal changes that take place each year that we obviously implement when that happens, for instance, additional requirements under harassment training, or things like the leave law changes, which we implement, as those things occur. But it is something that is, we're finally happy to be moving this forward.
And it's great work. Congratulations on all of your work. I can tell it was a lot of work.
Thank you.
Anyone else, comments or questions? I'll just add a few comments. Again, thank you both for being here this evening with us. I read through this in detail, and I had to do this in my previous job because I was part of the Employees Association, the president for a while. But I found this a little bit difficult because I'm not here on the day-to-day process and understanding this. When I was part of an organization for almost 30 years, some of this I just kind of wrote. And I could tell just, without having to read too much, because I just understood the operations of the organization so well. But I must say, having to, read through this with not having quite that background, it was quite challenging. The language itself can be a challenge itself, but just understanding the organizational structure and how things are put together. But obviously there's been a lot of time and effort and forethought in putting this together. So I just want to thank you for doing that. And I know, Adriana, your expertise as well, because the laws and regulations do routinely change. And as soon as you commit something to paper, it's obsolete, and then you have to make sure you address that when you can. And so I know how outdated, unfortunately, policies can become, but hopefully this will serve the district well for quite some time. Changes, understanding, of course, that'll happen, but I think it does certainly capture the essence of it and give a good foundation for us to move forward. Anything else, Mr. Hufford? Did you have something? Okay, all right. With that, do we have a motion to, the recommendation is to adopt the updated personnel policy manual?
Also move.
I'll second.
Director Lang and Director Holt.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. This manual is approved. Thank you all for, again, being here this evening and for the extensive work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we will move on to our next item, 9C, regarding the interfund loan. And General Manager, Mr. Friedel, I'll defer to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Nichols, members of the board. I'm going to keep this one. This is a recommendation to have an interfund loan of $3 million from our unallocated reserves in the general fund to Park Development Fee, also known as Quimby Fee Zone 4, for development of Canal Creek Southwest Park along Page and the 23 freeway. As you can see in the report, we do have some Quimby fees that have already been paid in Zone 4 that could be allocated for this project. It amounts to about $2.5 million or so. The need to actually, be safe in going out to seek a bid would be, we'd have to probably have, $5.5 million ready to go in order to award a bid for construction of this park. So we're short about $3 million. If we were to rely on the funds that we typically rely on, which is park dedication or Quimby fees, we would basically need development to occur on the boulevard. And when that occurred, we would collect the fees and begin construction of the park. But since the Parks and Planning staff and Mr. Hare have moved the project so far along, we're kind of ready to go. We're pretty far along and we could be out to bid shortly. And it's just a sense that in Zone 4 and along the boulevard in that section, there's a pretty decent likelihood that there will be additional units. So our recommendation is that we loan this general fund money to the Park PDF Quimby Fee Zone 4. That would allow us to go ahead and get this project out to bid within a few months. And the loan and the evidence of that the general fund would need to be paid back would be recorded. There's the loan document here on page, just page 178. So on page 178, it's a very simple short loan agreement. These are actually not uncommon among bigger agencies that can have like a utility fund loan, the general fund some money or vice versa. But we do intend to pay it back. And the reason for that is that the general fund money is very fungible, can be used for just about any purpose the board deems fit, while the PDF and Zone 4 money is limited to, expenditures within Zone 4 or projects that are directly benefiting Zone 4. So our recommendation is that we do create this loan. The time on which we would be paid back is as we receive future Quimby fees in that zone. So the way staff tries to do the capital budget, Tom has all these different pots of money that have little pieces in, and you got to kind of cobble together the money to be able to do certain projects. So our recommendation is that we every year pay 50% of the loan back or more. So we can pay 50% or more from whatever we actually receive in Quimby fees from Zone 4. That would let Tom be able to say, hey, if we got, 500 units and we got a $5 million check, we just pay off all 3 million and be done with it. But if we got $1 million on a project and Tom, wanted to not only spend some money at, at Canal Creek South and pay back the loan, say we needed to do something at Glenwood because the playground burned down, he could theoretically use some of that Quimby fees at Glenwood Park right next door. So that's why it might take a little longer to pay off if we only pay it at 50%, but it does still give Tom the ability to get some capital dollars for other parks in that zone if we need them. But if we don't need them, we'll pay it back faster. And because it's interfund, our recommendation is that it just be a loan between Tom and I, with Melissa making sure every year she reports to you, the full board, that Tom's giving me my money.
What's your collateral, Tom?
So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. So do you have any questions, comments? Yes, Director Huffer.
Comment and then a question. This was something we talked about initially with the Finance Committee with Director Holt and myself, and we both agreed that it makes sense. A minor concern that I have, and it's a little hard to tell from this map, but if I'm interpreting Zone 4 correctly, on the boulevard, it would just be anything on the boulevard west of the 23 freeway. And my impression, and I haven't looked at the any of the three land use alternatives or the boulevard plan, but my impression is much or most of the boulevard projects, certainly right now, and I think going forward, are east of the 23 freeway and technically would not fall into Zone 4. Is that correct?
That's correct. There are projects proposed in Zone 4. The most recent was Mill Creek that did get the green light to move forward with if you saw it.
The Christmas tree lot there.
Yeah. So that's one project, but it's also bigger than the boulevard. We don't have to limit the possibility to the boulevard. It can be from projects off the boulevard as well.
Yeah, Chuck, if you look at this is more of the focus, but if you look at, we did have Bill wasn't working that day. So if you look at this map on page 181, because it's actually anywhere in Zone 4. What the colored map represents is that planning area 12 that's there, right to the right of the Roman numerals. Right. So, but it's actually anywhere in Zone 4. So Zone 4 is much larger than just a little area. You're right, but like you're saying, looking at the map that they unveiled the other night, it's not like they're saying that they're going to here, or like there. It's mostly concentrated there, but it's. You can use PDF money wherever in that zone. It doesn't have to be in that particular planning area.
Right. Okay. But I guess my question would be, are there other projects
not that
on the horizon anywhere in Zone 4?
Yeah, not that we know of, no. But I'm just saying, I just want to point out that, that it's larger than that colored map.
Okay. All right. But the staff feels comfortable that over some period of time, that we can recover that
Yes.
$3 million.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Director Cuthbert.
Okay, so I was under the impression that the Christmas tree lot is being looked at and that would be in 12, correct?
Correct.
And have we already gotten the Quimby fees that would be across the street from Tarantula Hill? So we've already collected.
Yeah, that was they call that 299, and that paid us that, for their Quimby fee, it was 1.56 million.
So I don't know what's going to go in the Christmas tree lot. I know that they don't want to have as perhaps as many housing as has been proposed, but I'm going to assume that's going to probably go to housing eventually, especially after going to that meeting on Tuesday. So I think that's a huge possibility, but I want to bring up something else if we're looking at this map. Right now, if you take out the Canal Creek Southwest development, the only park that we have in Zone 12 is Glenwood Park, which is a very small park. And it doesn't really have a whole lot of amenities to it. If you look at Zone 1, you have 4 parks, and they're about the same size. And if you look at Zone 12 and you look at the neighborhood that's right adjacent to the Canal Creek Southwest, look at the density. Those houses are small houses that are all very close together. So it's very high density there. And then you have to also look, right now, there is no basketball court in Zone 12 at all, none. And you could say, well, wow, you've got all of Canal Creek Park right over here next door. No basketball court there. You think, well, you have the library park right up here. No basketball court there. Well, let's go up to Marview Park. That's just up the road, even though it's no basketball court there. I'm not making a big deal about basketball. I guess I am making a big deal about basketball.
I think so.
What I'm saying is, we've got this whole center of Thousand Oaks, and basketball courts are kind of a big deal in a park. People like to go to the park to play basketball. I know this because when my husband ever takes his scouts out, they like to go find a place to play basketball, and they have a hard time finding an empty basketball court because they're all used. And so I just think also, I think we'll get our money back, but this area in Thousand Oaks, and we're talking about the center of our city, really could use a nice, great big park like this. You have to think all over here in Caneo Oaks, you know, the closest park to them is Marview Park, you know, up the road. So this is going to benefit all of the Caneo Oaks area. It's going to benefit this highly dense area. Anything that's going to be built here on this boulevard, it's going to benefit, like it's going to benefit that area across from Tarantula Hill. It will benefit this one that's going to be at the Christmas tree lot if something goes up there. So, and then even the one that just went up at Lupe's isn't far away. It would still be a fairly close, large park for that whole Lupe's development. So I feel that this is a good use of our money and that this is something that we should do. And I have no fear that we will get the money back in Quimby fees because this is a big push for the city. Now, I'm just wondering, does the Jan's Mall fall into number 4 area? It does, doesn't it?
It's
No?
in zone, the Jan's Marketplace is in zone 4. It's a different planning area.
But it's in number 13, but it's in zone 4.
Correct.
So if anything did eventually happen at the Jan's Mall, which I don't see that happening in the really near future, again, that would be in that zone. That would be part of using that park. And that park is going to have a basketball court, which would be really nice.
Oh, we took that out.
Tonight, right?
Yeah.
Just an hour ago.
Anyway, it would be a very nice addition for our city. And I think it's an area that's been lacking a park of this type for a while. So that's my comment. I'm highly approve of this park. And I wanted to say, when I read through this and I saw that loan document of Jim Friedel giving the money to Tom Hare, I thought that was actually quite adorable. Gonna run it down the hall. And I thought, well, that's got to be the cutest loan document I've ever seen. So,
I think the important part is that we actually have it documented in writing.
right.
Thank you for the input and the comments and support, Director Cussworth. Any other directors' comments or questions? Okay. Thank you. I also believe that there should be no question as to whether the funds will arrive. Obviously, timing is unknown to all of us. It does appear that at least the one site there, the Mill Creek is looking at, has been mentioned many times the last couple of years. But I think the discussion, well, certainly the city council has been supportive of this effort of the increased development. So it will happen over time. It's just a matter of when. So I don't think it's going to be a question of whether we're going to get our money. It's just a matter of when. But I also do believe that taking initiatives like this will encourage more activity to happen. You know, as you say, hey, we're willing to take a step forward. We're willing to take a step out and do this. Who's going to join us in this effort? You know, and say, hey, we're on board. We're wanting to make some of these things happen. And it also helps that we have a shovel-ready project, correct, Mr. Hare?
Yeah, we're ready.
Yeah.
Couple months.
So we'll this time next year we'll be playing basketball at Connecticut Southwest.
The Hare family against the Cussworth family.
Okay, there we go. It's done. All right. I was going to have something else to say, but I'm going to save it for later, and we'll go ahead and move forward with this one. Any further comments? Okay. With that, I will look for a motion and see the recommendation is to approve interfund loan of $3 million from the unallocated reserves and general fund to the park development fee. Director Huffer, I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Well, since you just read the entire recommendation, I won't read it. I will just move that we approve staff recommendation as read by our chair.
Thank you very much. I think I had Director Cussworth's hand next. Yes.
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you very much. With all that said and comments, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that moves forward. Just for a matter of the record, I realize that when we made our motion for the previous item, revision of personnel policy manuals, there were some suggested amendments that were mentioned, but I don't think the motion included those amendments. Do we have to back up and clarify that those were part of the motion?
Parliamentary procedure would actually say that you'd have a motion for reconsideration, you'd reconsider the item, then you would have another motion to add the item in, and we would therefore do it. But if you tell me that the amendments that were read are acceptable to the maker of the motion in the second, staff will make sure that those happen just like that.
And
And
I think,
as I recall, maker of the motion, I'd accept those amendments.
yeah, I think Director Huffer was the one that brought those amendments to the attention of staff. And they seem to have full understanding of what those were. And I would defer to you that you would concur that they captured what your comments and
They
concerns
did,
were.
and appreciate Director Lang agreeing with those, so we don't need to go through the whole process again.
Okay, okay. So the director and the maker of the motion and second or in concurrence. So I think we're covered
Good
then.
catch. Yeah,
All right,
good
good. Just
catch.
want to make
Very
sure
good catch.
we got that covered. All right. Thank you for that. All right. So next we'll move on to item 9D, contracts for tree services with West Coast Arborists. Do I defer to general manager or?
This will be Mr. Hare again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Nichols, Director Lang, Director Cuthbert, and Director Holt, and Director Huffer. Yeah, well, no, I mean, we had a good discussion about the parks earlier on in art, and actually one of them, to me, are more of the most valuable assets that we have in our parks and throughout our whole system is our trees. In order to have a comprehensive tree maintenance programming, our staff does a lot of good things too, but we heavily rely upon some outside service providers to provide the work because we just don't have the staff to do what we need to do and what the community expects us to do. And then, about a year and a half ago, we had a decades-long relationship with Mortimer Tree Service. Dave Mortimer decided to hang it up. It was time. Yeah, we miss him too. He was great. So when that happened, there was a lot of different companies out there. We asked the city of Thousand Oaks and Dave himself, hey, give us some recommendations of some companies that we could use. We used about half a dozen of them over about the past year and a half or so. And for whatever reason, some of them would, better word, flake out, didn't respond, didn't provide quality work. But a couple of the contractors, West Coast Arborists and Treescapes, have displayed the qualifications that we need to provide a high level of tree services to the park's trees. There's some of the criteria we would look at is, like the capabilities that they have, the experience, the response time, their certifications and license, or do they have certified arborists on staff? So those two companies have displayed over the years, or over the last year and a half, that they're really highly qualified. So now we're trying to figure out, well, let's get these guys on a more formal contract with them. So if you look at our purchasing policy matrix that's attached, that we adopted in February of 2019, contracts between $60,000 and $200,000 require for this type of service would be like the general service for maintenance work. It would be like an RFP process where you go out and hire, you request for proposals. But we're asking that the board actually waive that requirement for a formal request for proposal process, because we've kind of already done that with an informal request for proposal process by going through these different companies. Then we think that, because of West Coast Arborists and Treescapes have displayed the quality of work and the services provided, for both a reasonable price, that we should give them each a non-exclusive contract. Now, this would not preclude anybody from, if another company who we haven't tried before came up to us and said, hey, we would like to do some of your tree work, we would still work with them and see if it's something that they'd be qualified to work with. And then we would, at some point, if they're qualified, at some point in the future, bring the same sort of contract to the board recommending with them. So the way we would split the work up too, so there's $175,000 each, and we spend about little under low $200,000 a year, anywhere from $150,000 to $225,000 a year on tree work. That it wouldn't be like A, B, A, B, A, B. Would be depending upon the company's availability and their experience that they have. Like one might be better in stump removal than the other one's better in just tree maintenance, or if they just depends. And then too, what they would do, they provide us a proposal, and if it's acceptable to us and they're ready to go, we'll go ahead and let them do the work. And so it'd just be a one-year contract. We'll see how this works out. We would, if they continue to provide good services, and if there's other companies out there who want to join this endeavor, we would bring back this to the board on an annual basis, like every February. With that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. Yes, Director Cusworth.
So I'm just a little confused, and this might be traditional, but why do you have to have in the contract a specific amount of money at this time? I mean, if we approve this, we're saying that we're willing to spend $350,000 on tree work. You never know what's going to happen. I guess what I'm saying is, why do we have to say we'll only pay you $175 and we'll only pay you $175 if, let's say, one of them keeps giving us better bids, or you're finding that you like them better? Are you limited that you can't go past the $175? I don't know why we're having to give a specific dollar amount to each company.
The purchasing policy, because if you look at the matrix there, if you go over $200,000, that would require another request for proposal price, just another level of scrutiny to where I'm asking you to waive the bid process. So and I'm totally exaggerating, we give one company $1 million worth of work. The other companies might go, well, hey, how about me? So it's spreading the. We've got two qualified companies. We generally only spend about $200,000 a year. If it does something that would have to exceed, and we actually vote on it, we would actually come back. This is extremely similar to our turf conversion, or we used to call it turf conversion, but drought response projects. The board before years in Chair Nicholas's time did a similar situation, ready to go, had a not to exceed amount. I'd say maybe about a month later, the state gave us, I don't remember what it was, $2 or $3 million in grant money, and we had to spend it in 6 months. And so I came back to the board and said, okay, I thought we were only doing 6 properties. We're actually going to do 28 properties, and I got to do it in the next 6 months. So I just came back to the board and said, due to this situation, I need to bump up the contracts for these guys. So I still have the flexibility to do that, but this is just on a historical basis. This is about how much we use. We have similar situations, I said, with the drought response. We have similar situations with our mulch suppliers too. We try to, again, not just concentrate on one particular, because we have multiple people who provide good service, and sometimes this company is not available, so we want to be able to turn to another company who we already have under contract, and they respond and give us the work.
So I guess what my question is, I understand what you're saying there is, hypothetically, let's say that Treescapes gets a huge jobs and they can no longer provide, the service to us. And we need $220,000 of service done. Treescapes isn't available, but we can only spend West Coast Arborist up to $175.
Correct.
So then, do you just come back to us and say,
Yes.
well, we're gonna have
Yes.
to just spend more
Yeah,
for
I
West
would,
Coast
I would just,
Harbor?
I would
They can
explain
come
this,
back
yeah, I
to
would
us.
explain the situation
Okay.
and may never, I mean, just in general, if we, we're gonna track you, because that's what we do with all these other ones, but in general, they'll be about the same, and if it does come to some situation, or even Treescapes gets a bigger job, or they go out of business or something like that, yeah, and I had to increase the not to exceed amount, I just bring it back to the board.
Okay, so this isn't a set in stone thing. That's
No.
what I was just wondering, because it seems strange to make something like that sort of set in stone. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Cuthbert. Mr. Hare, I was just reminiscing in my own mind about the situation with the Woolsey fire and Dave Mortimer having to do just an extensive amount of work with the oak trees that had been damaged. Can you refresh my mind, my memory, or in my mind, so I'm just trying to think what we did back then. Was that all covered under an existing contract, or did you have to go through a series of steps because you'd find more areas or more dead trees? Because that was kind of like the catastrophic situation where things.
That
kinda
one, it
happened.
was a little different because I had to have a different type of contract due to get the reimbursement from either FEMA or the insurance. So we were able to, we took to the board at that time, we had a few contracts that the board approved that were in response to the Woolsey fire, so I could get people working immediately, and then they fit. There's some conditions and requirements that the FEMA and Cal OES required that I had to put in those contracts, so that way we could get reimbursed.
Okay, so in that catastrophic scenario, there's other venues or other avenues that would take place.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, with that, we have actually 3 recommendations to, number 1, to waive the formal request for proposal process. Number 2, to authorize the general manager to execute contract with West Coast Arborists. Number 3, to authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Treescapes. So do I have a motion to address those 3 recommendations? Yes, Director Cuthbert.
So I'll also make the motions based on that you just read all 3 of those.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
very good. And is there a second to that?
I'll second.
All right, Director Huffer. All right, hearing no further comments or questions, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. That motion passes. Okay, we'll continue on. And next is our reports and announcements. We have 3 there. We have a capital improvement update with some nice descriptions and a nice Tom Hare spreadsheet. And then also we have some nice recreation highlights from Director, Administrator Hallis. Callis, thank you for that. Just like that, you know. And then also a nice update from Julie Spivak on the Caneo Senior Volunteer Program. Any comments on that? If not, we will move forward. Those are for your information. Okay, so next we have department reports. And next would be for Mr. Hare, the Parks Division report. Mr. Hare?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Nichols, members of the board. Just one thing, next meeting in 2 weeks, and then we'll be considering the grant agreement with the Teen Center and Global renovation and expansion to Teen Center. The city staff just today gave me their reports. That's on their agenda for February 9th, and I'll be attending that meeting on behalf of the Park District. Without any more questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hare. Next is a Recreation Division report. Ms. Callis.
Thank you, Chair Nichols and members of the board. Just, staff is getting ready for summer. We're already starting the summer catalog and trying to figure out what we can or might be able to do with programming and stuff for the summer. The current classes are actually going well. The Teen Center has several classes that are actually full now, which has not happened in a very, very long time. So we're starting to see some teens in the outreach get a little busier and stuff. So other than that, we're doing budgets this month. So everybody's going to be trying to figure out what the budget looks like for the next 2 years with all the changes and trying to put programs back into place and stuff and staffing. And other than that, I think, just trugging along. A new marketing person will be starting on the 16th. So I'll be sending out an email tomorrow, just kind of introducing her to everyone. I'll include you guys on that too. And with that, I'm available for questions.
Yes, Director Lane, go ahead.
Yes, any discussion on the concerts, summer concert series in the park?
Yeah, we are planning to do them with the current regulations that we would have to follow. So we will probably be planning them as drive-in concerts at this time until and as things start to open up and lax, then we'll make adjustments to them. So, but I think because the concert last year went well in the parking lot, we're hopeful that we will find either continue to that partnership with the Oaks or maybe find one of our own parking lots that we can do it in. It would still be fee-based. It's not going to be free because it's going to take some jiggering and stuff.
Mhm.
But our hope is that as things open up and we're allowed to gather and I'll do those things, we'll take steps to start doing that. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yes, Director Cusworth.
Director Lang's comment about the concerts made me think of something. Is it possible, like with the big screen that you bought, if you had the concert and we're projecting it up on the big screen so people in a parking lot parked way back would be able to see it?
I believe that it is possible. I think I would like to, we've had lots of trials and errors with our large screen. So we haven't got that quite nailed down yet. So I know they're going to be starting some movies back up again, probably in April when the winds are died down. So if we can get that process in the feeling good about the setup, I believe we could potentially project on it.
Yeah, it'd be like you're at the Hollywood Bowl, you know?
There you go, new task.
I mean, usually when I'm at the Hollywood
really.
Bowl, I'm back far enough that I'm looking at the screen.
Yeah,
So-
exactly, exactly.
Thank you. Yes, Director Heffer.
It's not a question, but a comment. I was just going through the Weeder's Digest and I guess we can no longer call you the new kid. I didn't realize it's been 5 years.
I know.
No more new kid. And that's
No.
Melissa now,
That's
so.
funny.
But I still feel new sometimes. There's so many things I just don't know. I mean, you got to be here a while to learn all the stuff.
That's funny because my husband, I told him, you cannot say new girl anymore.
Yeah.
Thank you. Director Cowles, thank you for the update. I did have a question with the, I'll just say on again, off again schools, going schools, not kids going back to school, kids, not particularly with the high school. How has that affected, if at all, what has been the attendance, what was hoping to be the attendance, or have you been able to tell a difference from some of that?
I don't believe that it's had a huge impact on us. I know that when the kids actually started going back to school and they're at the same level they currently are, our Old Meadows group of kids with special needs, a lot of them are back at school, but like Julie said in her report last week or whatever, not Julie, Devin, the school district worked with us and they're busing the kids to and from us. So we switched it up a bit, but we're still seeing the kids. I mean, when this all started, we lost all of our after school programs on the school site. So we're hopeful and looking forward to when the kids are back more and we can actually get on the school sites and offer those enrichment programs. But we've been pretty steady, but not as good as we thought we'd be for our quarantine
Okay, okay.
groups.
Does that include like after-school homework assistance and or the homeschool kids, things like, you know, you have some of those groups?
Yeah, it's, well, because remember we had to change it. So it's like a 5-hour program every day. So, because it's a camp, not what we would normally traditionally do. So, we can't do the 1 hour or the 2 hour things. We can now for art and fitness, but not for anything else.
Okay,
So it's kind of a give and a take on it.
okay. All right.
I answered that.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. Okay, next is the Management Services Division report. Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Chair Nichols. And as Director Lang mentioned, we had a very long MRCA meeting yesterday. Similar to what this board did at our last meeting, we reviewed the unassigned fund balance for the MRCA and the pension liabilities. Specifically, we discussed there was new legislation, well, recent legislation, where JPA entities that have public pensions, if a JPA were to dissolve, the member agencies would need to apportion out that pension liability. So that would mean for the MRCA, if something were to happen to the MRCA, not that we're saying it would, that pension liability would be apportioned between the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, Caneo Rec and Park, and Rancho Simi Rec and Park. So I'm happy to report that the MRCA followed the CRPD's footsteps, establishing reserve policies, assigning over $10 million to that, and is setting aside $4.5 million into a PARS trust, which brings their pension liability to 100% funded.
Wow, that's
So that was
fantastic.
well worth that very long meeting. And with that, I'm available for questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you. It's good news that our partner agencies are in the same mindset, so thank you for that. Okay, next is the General Manager's report. Mr. Friedel.
Yes, thank you, Chair Nichols, members of the board. Very briefly, this was a big week in the city, for the city. They had a pretty big discussion about the Mill Creek project, which I viewed along with probably some other folks in the room. And then also the city's General Plan Advisory Committee and community meeting. And one of the things I want you to know, and Tom didn't really mention it, but Andrew, Tom, Bill Palermo, they're going to be now kind of doing some work trying to interpret what the moving densities mean to our existing master plan and how it affects the tables and the parks per population ratios. So we're kind of in the react and understand mode to what that might mean for the park district, and we'll be, at some point trying to articulate what we think the effect will be on the park district and share that through that process here in the week. So that they're going to be busy with that. That's a big thing. And if you haven't paid attention or not paid attention, if you missed the Tuesday, I think it was just Tuesday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday night, it was pretty good, but it was good, and there's going to be even more input. So the city is really committed to hearing people and getting input. So we will share ours at some point. And before we do that, though, we certainly will run it by this board. We wouldn't share any comments without kind of having a discussion here. But they're undertaking a really big effort in a interesting time. To do it with the Zoom and stuff is a little harder than face to face, but actually a little easier in some ways too. Being able to just like hit it, click a button, and you're into that meeting is not an awful thing either. So our friends at the city are really busy, and we're paying attention and kind of participating.
Very good. Thank you. Questions of the General Manager? Yes, Director Lang.
At that meeting, what was the number count as far as participants approximately?
I heard about 250, but I think there were ways that they couldn't count, because I think you could just passively watch it in addition to being zoomed in. And then they also had, I think, a Facebook Live situation too. So I don't know, but I think they had a pretty good turnout.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Thank you. Okay. We'll go-
Questions?
Oh, yes, Director Cusworth.
So I went to that meeting. I thought it was very interesting. In one hand, I think more people might attend because it's much easier. And then by doing all of those polls, they were able to get instant feedback from people, which is something you can't really do if you have 200 people in a room. One thing though that I want to ask you that seemed odd to me, they were incredibly well prepared, and they had all of these different scenarios and which one would you want to vote on? And I kept thinking, but you don't own any of this property, most of it, that you're making these decisions on, like the Oaks Mall and the Jans Mall all these different parcels they were talking about, you know, the auto, you know, the auto mall and all these different things. So I'm assuming, are they just trying to get an idea of what they would approve if, say, the Oaks Mall wanted to do something? Because obviously, if the Oaks Mall said, oh, we don't want to be a mall anymore, we're going to sell to developers, that would be their decision. And this would just be the city taking into account what the people would want based on that. Because they were giving all these scenarios like they were consulting with all of these property owners. But in reality, the city doesn't own this property, and they're only going to have any power on this, on what they approve to do there. If the Jan's Mall decides they want to just stay there, there's no housing going to go in there, correct?
Correct. The general plan is a planning document, long range for the city and how they wish to see it evolve. So existing uses under the general plan are not likely to be affected whatsoever. And it's going to be for those existing property owners as their capital facilities age to the point where they want to get rid of it, or somebody says, I got a much better idea for you, I'm willing to buy you out. So no property owner is going to be forced to sell or anything like that or change their use. It's just that when they are ready to kind of establish, upgrade the property, sell the property, do something else with the property, the new general plan will kind of guide what could go there. So I'm a little rusty on my land use, but at some point, really old uses become like existing non-conforming uses, and they're not supposed to be there anymore, but they've had permits from the 1920s and they're still operating and they can keep going and going and going. But properties do turn over, capital facilities age out, and generally speaking, I'd be shocked if any of those properties had land use designations which were lower than their current general plan designation. In other words, it's unlikely, I haven't looked because I couldn't tell from that a quick look. It's unlikely you would see somebody that had some sort of commercial designation have it changed to like low density residential. I mean, that's not going to happen, right? So they're generally making the land more developable for the property owners is a general characterization.
Well, unless you look at the Conejo Valley High School property, they went from commercial to somewhat high density residential because of that wall. They couldn't get the wall down. So, I mean, I was going to say that can happen, but anyway, I was just wondering because I thought it seemed like, whoa, all these diagrams they were doing, and a lot of it would just sort of depend, I guess, on what the owners wanted to do in the future, because, based on what was there at the Conejo Valley High School, also you can change zoning. I mean, it's pretty flexible sort of thing. So I was just clarifying that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that report. All right, next is director's reports and follow-up reports on meetings, conferences attended. I'm going to start to my left here with Director Huffer.
Thank you, Director Nichols. I guess there are just two meetings. Participated, I guess Tuesday night, the same night as the city program. We had the Ventura County Special District Association Zoom meeting, and they had two representatives from the state organization that were talking about legislation and some other things going on. And I guess they're trying to recruit someone to take over as president of the local chapter, and they're still working on that. The other meeting last week, I attended via Zoom, a meeting of the ad hoc committee, COSCA ad hoc committee on staffing and budget, which Brian Stark put together a real nice presentation on the challenges, the shortfalls that COSCA currently has with their current staffing, and came up with some recommendations that we had representatives from both the city. Gary Rogers was there from the city, and Jim and Tom and Matt were representing the Park District at the meeting, along with the electeds, myself, and then Councilmember Jones, formerly Director Jones, were part of the ad hoc committee. And the recommendation that staff made to the committee is that they would like to increase cost of staffing by 4 positions. And they were, the suggestions were one new position called supervising park ranger, which I believe would be between Brian and Matt, be 1 additional level, and then 2 additional ranger 2s and 1 additional ranger 1. So we had 3 additional rangers to improve the staffing. So the bottom line, the question I asked was, what's this going to cost? And the estimate was total cost, including salaries and benefits and all the other stuff, would be somewhere in the, I think it was like 625 or something like that range. And Gary said, sure, the city can do that. And Jim said, sure, the park district can do that. So somewhere along the way, we're probably going to be hearing about some budget adjustments to improve the staffing level at Costco. So I don't know, Jim, if would be appropriate, but this is really a good report. Maybe it could be distributed to the entire board.
Yeah, yeah, it's sure, it's a public document. Yeah, I was gonna say, I can't just say, yeah, sure, on 325, just to make it clear for the board. So we were talking about doing this for the upcoming new fiscal year budget. So we've been talking about how to build those positions into both the city and the park district. How do we build those into our budgets moving forward? And then ongoing, because you don't hire them for 1 year, it's the new normal. So how do we do that? And it's not just a easy thing, because that's real dollars, but it's also really necessary. And that's what you'll see in the report there, how evident it is that we need some help.
I'm gonna give Jim a loan. I got some money coming. I got like this.
Yeah, it's 3 million. You can take that with 3 million. So perfect.
Higher interest rate back to him.
Just as long as Melissa has it in writing.
Yeah.
Yes, Director Cutsworth.
So, well, that sparked the question to me, when are we going to get started on our benefit assessment? Weren't we going to have a presentation and kind of get started on getting a survey going? Because part of our benefit assessment, we had talked about adding more employees to Costco with our open space.
Right. So that actually is underway. We have talked to the consultant. We're trying to get the questions kind of revised and re-upped, and then we'll get the committee back together and say, okay, because we need to tweak the questions. We were so close to done, and then a year ago it was like the messaging and questions had stuff to do with Woolsey Fire and stuff, and not a peep about anything with COVID or anything like that. So we're just tweaking some of the questions. Then we'll get the committee back together, and then before the survey, and there was a general consensus during this discussion that you want there to be like clear sunshine in the COVID world. And when I say that, clear sort of, we're emerging from the COVID hibernation. So the consultants were, everyone's guessing, but they were thinking they probably wouldn't even want to see the survey go out until April, I think they said at the earliest.
Yeah.
So we'll get together with you guys pretty soon.
Okay, but correct me if I'm mistaken, Jim, but the funding for this Costco staffing, additional Costco staffing, would not be reliant upon eventual approval. Because I mean, the financing, public financing is at least a couple of years down the line.
Right, correct.
Looking at something more immediate.
So
for the staffing.
Exactly. So when we do our annual audit, and we come to the audit report at the end of the year, we provide you the information on how we did, and you do know for the last few years we've been able to put a little money into our different reserve funds. We're getting closer to the target funding for the OPEB and pension benefits. So we think that the money that has been going into there we might not have to push that much money there anymore. And at the end of the year, we might experience some extra money left over. So if we spend it on Rangers, there won't be money left. We have some perceived future savings with, you know, what we've experienced in the past with our reserve funds at the end of the year. The end of the year, basically we've had $1 million or $2 million left over, and that's been allocated and does capital, right? You know, a lot of times it finds its way into eventually a capital project, but the open space is in trouble without some additional help. So we need
this
some
will be
rangers.
coming to us as a part of the new, in the next.
It's going to be part of the new budget. And what really is going to happen is we might notice it's about the price of a playground. It'll be maybe instead of 2 or 3 playgrounds a year, 4 playgrounds a year, it'll be 1 or 2, or, you know, it's if I had to boil it down to what might we be giving up, it'll be leftover money for capital, and we won't be doing a playground or something. It's kind of how it ultimately at the very end translates out.
Thank you. Okay, Director Holt, reports,
No,
follow-ups?
I thought probably in addition to our meetings, I had 2 Zooms. I don't remember what I put on that sheet, but I checked my calendar, so it must not have been too important.
Okay, very good. Director Cusworth?
Okay, so I went to that meeting, but I also went to Jason Love's Comedy in the Living Room. So we started out coming to his comedy club. It was in this room. And then we went to a drive-up one. And then we said, well, we'll just try one in the living room, which we really enjoyed. And he's doing another one tomorrow. And he gets really top people. In fact, my son, who kind of follows comics, I sent the flyer out to all my kids because now you can just stream in. So he gets people from all over the United States. They don't have to be here. And he's had people streaming in from Canada. It's only $5 for about an hour and 15 minutes. It's really helping these people have employment, and it's a fun hour. Anyway, my son, he saw that and he goes, I don't know how he's getting these people. I've signed up, you know, we'll be going. So if you wanted to, and I was going to bring flyers for you and I forgot, but I guess I could email you. But it's just a fun thing to go to, and you don't even have to leave your living room. Oh, you go to it too? Yeah. You see it? So, I mean, it's fun. And so I'm going to give you a joke because I've been kind of focusing a little bit on talking to people about the homeless in Canal Valley, some of, you know, the officials and things. So this was one of the jokes. And I've told you my son lives in Silver Lake, and we've gone to Echo Park, so we've seen this. So this fellow just moves to Echo Park. And he says, well, I go to Echo Park, and here's all of these homeless people living in the park. Like they're tents, like they're set up, they're living there. I went to one guy, he had a 3-room tent. It was beautiful. He had a view of Echo Lake. He had a view of the skyline of LA. He said, this is a pretty good deal. So I went up to him and I said, how did you manage to get this spot? And he said, oh, I don't own this. This is an Airbnb. I thought it was funny. And I told that to my son, and he said, oh yeah, if you bought property there, you'd be paying a couple $1 million. And these people are just kind of set up there in the park. So hopefully we'll be able to help the people in our neighborhoods before that happens. But I thought that was pretty funny.
Thank you. Director Lang?
Yes, as implied, I attended yesterday's MRTA marathon meeting. I also, as Director Upper mentioned, attended the BCSDA annual awards event, which is usually a banquet and so forth, but not restricted, but we included the awards for the General Manager of the Year and Director of the Year. And I was asked to participate in the selection process of the General Manager of the Year, and then also making the presentation to the General Manager, who is Dan Karanek, the General Manager of the Blueberry Market. And so, all of our general managers are so excellent, top of the crop. Dan is just another well deserved. Thank you for that. And I also It's on. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Lean. Anyway, attended VCSDA meeting, made presentations of General Manager of the Year. And then also I attended the Moore Park Watershed Parks Recreation Conservation Authority meeting with Casca. And from the Park District, Mr. Hare, Mr. Friedel, and Matt Kuba. And I was there with Don Robinson representing the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy. And then the city of Moore Park also had a representative. And this is all based on the need to connect trails between Moore Park property in Tierra Valley and Casca property up by Joe McCrae Ranch and or the YMCA area. So that was a good meeting. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Yes, Director
Nichols,
Huffer.
I had
Mhm.
one other item that
Yes,
I
please go ahead.
meant to mention, but Rochelle had included in her recreation highlights, but there are several of us that have been working last several weeks with Julie over at CSVP and keeping our fingers crossed that we'll be able to kick off the free tax preparation program on February 12th. Mostly
Awesome.
remote, people will be coming in to have their documents scanned, but after that, everything will be done by phone or Zoom or done remotely anyway.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's great. Appreciate your efforts, particularly in that. So thank you. As far as my follow-up reports, I too attended the City Thousand Oaks General Plan Advisory Council meeting on land use. A couple of my observations from that is, I don't know how closely our staff has looked at this, but they have some quite the robust presentation. I did happen to notice that in the alternatives, 1, 2, and 3, as far as their proposed changes for land use planning in the 2045 general plan, the Estella Park and Beyer Park were not identified as parkland. Beyer Park, yeah. And those are these are what they call areas of change. And they've designated certain areas of change, mostly along Teal Boulevard, but a couple other areas. And I do recall it towards the end of the presentation that Matt, I think is his name, Matt Ramey, was indicating that the general plan allows for development, but does not cause development, or does not develop the land. And so there was a couple of questions, and I know a couple of, I think there was let's see, Rory Skay and Wyatt McCrae, I think both asked the questions, well, how are you going to accommodate parkland? And his comment was, well, we can't designate parkland because if it's already a land that's being used, it's going to change that use and perhaps could cause a lower valuation of that property or could be considered a taking. So which I knew that was going to be the case. So we're not going to be seeing any lands identified as parkland, but I would think that at least our existing parkland would stay there. And if not, then is that being taken from us, for example? So I'm sure we'll be ironing out some of those things. But as
And I apologize, when I said error, I didn't mean to mispronounce Beyer.
Oh,
Bayer.
oh.
It's meant, we caught that and we said, hey, those are even some green
Oh,
spots.
I thought you
So
said Bayer, not error. Gotcha.
So staff had told us, at least for sure with Estella, I don't think we even caught Beyer.
Yeah, there's a couple of them, and we got, there was a few, they didn't have time to make the correction.
Yeah, and I know this was the first time the public has seen this, and I don't know that there's been a whole lot of advance warning, but it got to the point where it says, man, I want to see these maps a little closer, get the microscope out, say, I want to kind of make sure that things are not changed. It should be. Yeah, I don't want to slide things through the process, and I know you folks are going to be spending a lot of time with that. But just it caught my attention. It's like, okay, there's some critiquing that needs to go through here. And they even mentioned that even though there's 3 alternatives, that the final plan might be a blend of 1 or 2 or more of those alternatives. What I did want to suggest as a result of this, and whether this is for future board discussion or maybe our finance committee or even our property acquisition subcommittee, is to perhaps consider something like a Thousand Oaks Boulevard overlay PDF zone, as tying on to some of our conversations earlier about, is it in the east side of the boulevard or the west side of the boulevard? Because the city has designated that specific plan area unto itself. And perhaps another concept would be, well, maybe we need to look at the areas of change as an overlay zone for how do we move forward as a park district, because we're not going to be getting lands designated as parkland within the general plan process. And basically, we will be relying upon Quimby fees to help develop our parks. But I think if we find some way to focus in on Teal Boulevard, which seems to be the city's focus, or where they're either trying to direct or where they anticipate development were to be, and then in those outlying areas of change, that whether it be in the villages or otherwise, that to somehow kind of partner with them in their approach and take that similar approach for financing and kind of directing funds as they come to make sure that our parks are enhanced, because I don't know that we're going to be getting land. It'd be nice if we did through this process, but I'm not going to bank on that. But certainly get some funding. Now, how do we best use that funding? It might be outright purchases, which again goes back to the acquisition committee. But I think if we start thinking of that way as an overlay zone for how do we address projects in that area, not just because it's within zone 4 or zone 3, because one has more parks than the other, but treat it as a entity in and of itself, and how do we best address the park district concerns based on what the city is kind of forecasting for the next 30 years. So I'll leave that to staff to kind of maybe determine how best to do that, whether again that's an assessment and report to the board, or perhaps referral to one or both of our committees to assess that. But regardless of how we do it, I think we need to do something, and I would like to see something that comes back to us as how we're going to do that. And it may be a phased approach, again, depending on how the general plan unfolds, but that's ramping up. And so I think we're getting a better picture of how that might happen and how we're better prepared to respond to it. So how that unfolds, I'll be anxiously awaiting what your recommendation is, whatever that happens to be. Okay, so now that moves us on to items from the public. Step 2, Mr. Segedy, anybody hanging with us? Okay, thank you, sir. No closed session for this evening. And with that, unless there's some objection, I'd like to move to adjourn this meeting. Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.